Hello everybody, welcome back to another episode of Anabaptist Perspectives. I'm up here at Anabaptist Financial with Timothy Stoltzfus, and I think you've worked at this area for a while. You've been involved with young people, Anabaptist young people, quite a lot over the years. The thing that I was most interested was you did a survey of different Mennonite youth and then released those findings at the REACH conference back in 2017. So can you just guide me through, what has your interaction been with conservative Anabaptist people, and in what context have you engaged with them?
Sure, yes. Well, my wife and I served as pastor on the pastoral team at our church for about 17 years, wow. 18 years, and that has given me a vision, for young people. Previous to that, I also was involved in Christian school administration at a high school level, and also as teacher for about 6 years.
Oh, wow.
So with those experiences and backdrop, and we have 9 children of our own, Linda and I, that God has blessed us with. So we are involved in their lives and all the issues they're facing. And you're right, about 2 years ago I did the survey with over 600 respondents.
Wow, that's pretty good.
From a wide swath of our conservative Anabaptist constituency. And out of that I really began to get a vision for the issues that our young people are facing. And I still remember when those responses started rolling in and I actually got to start reviewing them. It just gripped my heart, the different issues that they're facing. And Reagan, I remember the one morning when I started reading some of the responses that had come in the previous night, and I got on my knees and wept before the Lord, and just some of the pain and some of the difficulties that they're encountering.
So based on your research, what would you say categorizes a young person as Anabaptist or Mennonite? What are those particular parameters?
Well, Reagan, that's very hard to define, and I don't think I have the answer. But I'll just give you my perspective.
Yes, we can try.
On that. Often we look at the external indicators, clothes and the culture that we embrace. But really, what makes a person, ideological or theologically a Mennonite or an Anabaptist is much larger than that, of course. And I'm not sure that there's an easy answer for that. I think back to my own experience when I was about 21. I would see as the moment, the epiphany for me, when I began to really internalize and personalize my Anabaptist faith. I had been born in an Anabaptist home, had been raised that way, but about age 21 is when I began to see my worldview from an Anabaptist perspective. And so I think a lot of young people are grappling with that. It comes out in the way the things they do, the way they dialogue with their leaders, the books they read. But I haven't been able to pin just one thing down. I really believe that the focus that our generation has had, or we maybe can call it a neo-Anabaptism that is emerging. I think a lot of young people are thinking these issues through. Is this the way I want to live? What does this mean for my generation? I think there's a wave that's starting to build, and I'm really excited about it. Yeah. They're embracing the tension between our ethnicity, our culture, and also wider evangelicalism. So I think we're on the cusp of some really powerful next generation things happening in the Anabaptist in our culture.
It's what you're painting there as a picture is almost more. You have these young people that are looking a lot deeper.
Yes.
They're like, what is
right.
actually going on deep down inside?
Right. Yes.
What is it that makes these things valuable that we do? That's really interesting. I think that's exciting.
Yeah, they're actually. I think they're kind of tired. One of the responses that we're going to perhaps talk about a little more is of the just the traditionalism, the almost legalism as they see it sometimes, and they want a vibrancy. They want something that's alive. They're not necessarily trashing or wanting to throw it away, but they want authenticity. They want something that's more authentic and relevant.
And maybe fresh?
Yes.
Is that yeah? So out of the results of this survey, what did you see that, and okay, let me just back up and just say, I think a lot of the people you surveyed were what we would say millennials, Generation Z, that age range. What did you see that they were valuing, and what were they doing well with, especially when it came to their Anabaptist faith?
Yes. Well, the average age was, I think, 21 and a half, somewhere in there. So that was definitely that generation. Well, one of the questions I asked was, what do you appreciate about your Anabaptist culture, heritage? And it was very strong, the biblicism that we have, the literal interpretation of the Bible, non-resistance, the culture of brotherhood, community, helping each other. That was probably that came through stellar, just the community of believers.
Interesting. And that was across all the different aspects of Anabaptists, because I'm sure you had a wide range of representation.
Yes, we had, I had over 20 of our groups, all the way from Amish through, some of the Old Order groups, Mid-Atlantic, a lot of Beachy, Keystone, a lot of unaffiliated, some of the River Brethren, German Baptists, just a wide sampling of...
And that still came pretty strong across about all of those.
Well, that was, I didn't necessarily trace, respondents back to their, the exact constituency group that they affiliate with, but the idea of brotherhood, of community, of strong Bible, just a literal interpretation of Scripture, that was a predominant theme for what they appreciate, about our faith. Some of the other aspects that they spoke to were family, the strong family values. That was very appreciated, and just the heritage that they were given, the parents, grandparents who care about them, and just the faith tradition, that would come with our culture.
So we were looking at what they value, what they're doing well at, but then what are struggles that you saw in the Anabaptist young people?
Yes. Reagan, that's where, as a leader myself, as a parent, where my heart really went out. I mean, I rejoiced to see the strong response for what we're doing well, and that's kind of what I would have perhaps expected. I think the areas in which we don't get as good a mark were some of the struggles that I referred to earlier, with just a perception that we're trying to maintain a tradition, a culture that's not necessarily rooted in Scripture. And I think what's happening there is this generation is not seeing the biblical principles which are behind why we do what we do. So I saw that coming out. That was predominant, like just a questioning about maybe legalism, what's perceived as legalism, the strong biblicism that we refer to as a strength. The flip side of that then could be an overemphasis maybe on tradition and
rules, maybe.
Yes, rules, strictness. Yeah, they're struggling with that. Along with that, the struggle to see church as culturally relevant, and they are seeing outsiders as those from outside our Anabaptist tradition as hard to integrate into our church life, and they struggle with that. They wish it were easier to engage our wider communities. One of the areas which my heart bled the most is the struggles they are seeing and having with church disagreements, times when our church Churches have, we call them, church splits. That's going hard for them, and a lot of them are really struggling with that. You could just feel the pain with a church split and the disagreements and the bickering and the fighting. I think we as leaders need to be very, very serious about that, because when we disagree and don't get along, it really does affect this generation, our children.
It sounds like a lot of what you're saying is centering around church, that they're struggling with how church is being done, our culture is being done. What about in their personal lives?
Well, that is, they were very honest with that as well. A lot of the questions I asked, and they could respond to, were questions about their personal habits and personal things that they're struggling with. So yeah, areas of music. I was actually surprised and disheartened that many of this age group are really, I think, up to 40% were listening to secular music, and by their own admission, spending too much time online. One of the questions I asked was about their smartphones or online habits, and by their own admission, I think 60% responded, "Yeah, I spend too much time online. I'll be admitted."
They freely offered that. That's interesting.
Well, it was one of the questions they could select, and that was the highest, if I recall. So there's a lot of in our culture, or in our modern world, there's just a lot of pressure there, with online and social media. So they're aware of that. They're aware of that, and that's good. And I know, just aside from that, I talk to young people, and I'm so encouraged when I hear them say, I'm just going to take a fast. I'm going to take a social media fast for a month or two. And I talk to young boys, young fellows, and I'm getting Instagram. I'm erasing it off my phone. I'm not, or Facebook.
Wow.
I'm erasing the app, deleting the app, because I feel that it's a distraction to me. So that's so encouraging to me when I think there is a wave of young people that want to do what's right, and they're realizing that there is a bit of a struggle here that I need to just take control of my personal life.
And it's almost like, okay, that's very interesting, because I've noticed that as well. And it's just especially at Bible school and different places where I've been around a lot of Anabaptist young people. And it's like Facebook and Instagram and Snapchat and all of those had this like little glimmer around them at first. And then after a little while, the glimmer started disappearing, and they're like, wow, these things are actually really kind of lame. They're not that great. And by their own admission, like, no, I don't even want it, which is, I think, amazingly, it makes me have a lot more hope for this generation when instead of, they're like, wow, it's wasting too much of my life. I could be using this better.
I want to reclaim my time, my life, and they're aware that this is robbing me of something better.
Yeah.
And it's so powerful when they come to that on their own. You can legislate that or try to, and prohibit it, but it's powerful when they come to that conclusion on their own.
And I've seen that a lot more. That's really interesting. I'm sure there was a lot of things that surprised you in this category, though, as far as struggles that young people had.
There were. One of the other pains that I see coming out, which, again, I believe our young people and our leaders are addressing, is the area of singleness, and a lot of, I think it was about the second or third most painful thing that that a lot of them were facing was either rejection in a dating relationship, in a breakup, or just fears about, am I going to be single the rest of my life? And that was actually one of the questions I asked on the survey was, are you content with being single? Are you dating? Are you not? And I, put all the statistics together. And that's a big one. A lot of them are struggling with singleness, and I think the age in which our young people are getting married is creeping up a bit. there's some work that we can do there to encourage our young people and give them hope for finding God's will in marriage.
Yeah. Sounds like you have a lot of people who are asking a lot of questions and have a lot of deep hurts and are genuinely searching for answers.
Yes.
And it's almost like they just need someone to point the way.
Well, that's what I gathered. That's where the hope that I saw through the pain, through the disappointments, and through the sometimes, honestly, disillusionments that they were having with our culture. I saw most of them are not wanting to just throw it away. They're wanting to, in fact, one of the questions I asked is, do you intend to remain an Anabaptist? And most strongly agreed with that. The majority strongly agreed with that statement. So our young people are intending to remain an Anabaptist within the Anabaptist faith.
That's really interesting. So despite all the struggles and shortcomings,
that's correct.
It's like we're fallible, we're humans, we're fallen creatures, but we still see that there's something in here that's worth fighting for, worth standing for this. That's really encouraging. So an interesting thing we can look at historically is the Anabaptists tend to just, one generation does it this way, and then they pass that on, and then it just keeps getting passed on. For better or worse, that's kind of how we've transmitted our beliefs, our culture. This is just the way we've done it. Obviously, from what you've been saying, my generation, the millennials, they see that. Do you see that that's how they're going to continue passing on their beliefs, or are they going to kind of kick against that and say, no, I'm not interested in preserving our culture that way?
Well, I think that's the big question for this next generation. I sometimes tell my boys when we are discussing, aspects of, are we going to do this? Are we going to do this? How's it going to look? I tell them, you know what? That's the question that your generation, and when your generation is in church leadership, you're going to have to make those decisions. So what I see is, yes, there's this tension with biblical traditions, which other generations, applications, which they made in their day, with biblical principles in mind, and trying to flesh out Scripture. How do we live? But those have kind of, we've kept those applications all the way through, and today they're maybe not as relevant as they were then, or they could maybe be, we could do it differently today and actually keep the spirit or the biblical truth a bit better. So I think our generation, your generation, is really going to have to apply that. But I see that, I think they're willing to do it. I have a lot of optimism that they're not just, well, here's the tendency. The tendency is to react and just throw the whole application away because it doesn't fit for today. Whereas I think they need to look through the lens of Scripture and how are we going to apply it, into our life and because times have changed. And rather than just being riveted to one application, we need to be willing to see, how can we apply this today? So it may look different. And we as church leaders need to be probably comfortable with some change, but a biblicism that's underlying, looking at through the lens of Scripture. It's almost like a neo-Anabaptism that has to emerge.
Sure.
I think so.
Sure. And it's not like they're just not just, I'm just going to throw it all away. It's like, let's reanalyze what we have. That's very interesting.
And why are we doing this? What's the biblical principle, and how does it look for me in my time?
And it feels like there's a lot of wrestling that's happening right now.
I think there is. I think there is.
Instead of just like, oh, that's just how we've always done it, we'll just keep doing it that way. It's like really wrestling through these things.
I think the young person in your generation is, see, we're all faced with a question, what culture am I going to embrace? And going back to my own experience again, when I was in college, it was actually my sociology class that helped me become an Anabaptist at heart. Because the lights just all went on for me. It's like everyone has culture. Everyone, we're cultural beings. So I began to see the subculture, the Mennonite subculture that I was raised in a totally different light. Now, Anabaptism is much more than just primarily cultural, but that's inescapable, and that was the moment for me when I really began valuing the biblical traditions and faith practices that were in Anabaptism. And so I think in this generation and your generation, there'll have to be some more of that. And it may look a little different. But the biblical principles of what was Christ teaching, what does it mean to be an Anabaptist, I think they'll be the same.
Yeah, the principles don't change.
Right.
Yeah, the culture kind of ebbs and flows some. Yeah, that's important that our generation understands that and is okay with trying to to understand the differences there.
But what are we going to do with the distinctive markers?
Yeah.
I think those are the sticklers.
Yeah.
The distinctive markers, often dress or outward. I'm not proposing that I don't think your generation is proposing they just all be thrown away, but they're wrestling with that. How does that, what are we going to do with those? Is that really what makes us Anabaptists?
And what's it going to look like?
What's it going to look like?
Yeah.
So I don't have the answers for that, but that's what you're struggling with.
Oh boy. Okay, let's come back in 20 years and reanalyze this and see where
But I'm excited
we ended up.
I'm excited because there's a wave of young people who are really spiritually alive, and they want vibrancy, they want authenticity. They're crying out for they're reacting to maybe some deadness that they see, and just a traditionalism that's maybe just a drumming and a harping on these externals, and they're saying no, there's more to than that. Let's do it for love of Jesus, or there's just a crying for that renewal. So I believe it's going to, if you couple that with a young person who's not reactionary but visionary, I think we can.
That's a pretty good recipe right there.
I think so.
Yeah, I like that. So you're not a doom and gloom person when you look at this.
I don't think Anabaptism is dying out. I don't think it's conservative Anabaptism. I think it's alive and well. There's a lot of things to wrestle with, but I believe that we have a generation who will maybe just grasp and apply the scriptural truths in a new way, which may look a bit different, but I'm very excited about it.
I like that, and I think that's something my generation particularly needs to hear. There's a lot of doom and gloom, like, oh no, the world's falling apart, everything's terrible, we're losing all of these amazing things, and when in reality, actually that might not be what it is. I like that.
See what your generation wants, Reagan. So you want relationships. You want authenticity, and I think where leaders and parents have failed often is in offering that and just that that relationship. One of the cries which came just bleeding through and through in these responses was when failures in relationships, especially with fathers. If there are any fathers listening, I just appeal to you. I think when I asked the question, what was the most painful thing that ever happened to you, I believe the top was death, a death of a loved one, or separation through death. But the second was fathers, just alienation with dads, and dads being unfaithful, walking off, being uninvolved, passive. We've got to do better. And then leaders, church leaders as well. I think a lot of church leaders are engaging their young people, but there's really, that's what you want. You want engagement, relationship, and not just on a human level, but also with God. And it's exciting. It's exciting. I get so excited when I see young people who are making these decisions, and I just like, wow, let them go. they're going to go far. I'm
Yeah.
proud to see them. I'm very pleased with the decisions they're making, personal decisions. I see young people who are taking their Christian life very seriously, studying the Bible, personal disciplines, and prayer, and and fasting, and it's very powerful. I'm very encouraged.
Wow, that's really neat. I think we need to keep hearing that, because I think my generation just gets discouraged after a while.
Yeah.
There's so much out there about how the millennials just are horrible, basically.
No,
even from secular fields, and it's just after a while it's just like, come on, it just feels like too much. And hearing this, I think it's gonna be really helpful to a lot of our listeners. So just kind of following up with what you just said there, what would you say to a conservative Anabaptist young person who might be listening to this interview?
Sure. Engage your pastors, your parents. Don't withdraw. I believe one of the natural tendencies for anyone who is hurt or goes through pain is to disengage and withdraw. So I would just plead with you to speak to your parents, speak to your leaders, let them know what's going on in your life, let them know the issues you're facing. Be open. And I think most parents want to hear and help. Most leaders want to hear and help. So rather than disengaging and becoming embittered through the hurt and the pain, engage and dialogue and resolve it, through in that manner. The other thing I would really encourage your generation to do is to not react. We were talking about the traditionalism and maybe the struggle with some of the rules and so forth, and church standards and practices. I would encourage young people to not react to those things and just throw everything away. If they see something that, well, what relevance does this have to today? And I just don't understand it. I don't see it. And often the tendency is, well, hey, if that's Anabaptism, I'm done. I'm finished. That doesn't even make sense. But be willing to see things we need each other. Your generation, we need you. We need the vision that you have and the vibrancy that you have. We need just the zeal, the energy. We need that. The church needs that. So, but then you need the balance of wisdom and experience. So we need each other. And I think for a young person to just not throw everything away because they don't feel they're being heard, or it's not applicable, or they don't understand. Just be willing to engage and dialogue. I remember hearing this story of a young person who, I think it was a son of a church leader, who he saw they were going through some church disagreements. And as I said before, church disagreements affect your generation, our children, very, very closely. It affects them very deeply. And I remember hearing the story of this young fellow who saw these bickerings, maybe open disputes, in church. And he said, if this is Christianity, I'm done. And he actually walked away. As far as I know, he's not even a Christian. He walked away from his faith. Now, see, to me that's tragic. First of all, that he had to react in that way. We must do better than that. We need to have our dialogues in a Christian manner so that our children don't struggle in that way.
Yeah.
But see, that's not. Don't react in that way. The merits of biblical, right living, or in a biblical biblicism, doesn't rise and fall on one individual or even one church. Just because there's a failure here, you can't just throw everything out. You have to look at it on the merits of what is actual truth, what is biblical, and so when there's a failure, and especially in relationships, boy, it just clouds everything. You just, that's what I'm pleading with you. Don't let that don't overreact to that, to where you just want to toss it all away.
That's some good advice. Yeah. Is there anything else you would like to add?
I just really excited how your generation, Reagan, is taking the stresses of technology and online habits and trying to bring balance. I think that's very needed. One of the questions I'd ask as well were about having purpose, asking if there's purpose, and a large number of respondents felt they didn't have purpose. They were looking for purpose and looking for meaning, and I personally believe that an overemphasis on social media and on the virtual presence can destroy, or it tends to erode that. It can bring discontentment, dissatisfaction. So I would plea with a young person who is feeling aimless and without purpose, just get into relationships. Maybe get off your phone and just actually, we're made to dialogue with people and actual, and there's a place for for connections, online connections, certainly. And we live in an age when we can have that. It's wonderful. Let's use it. But let's not let it replace an actual, authentic, face-to-face communication. I think that's what we're made for, and that's what we really want. So we live in an age of a lot of connections electronically, but I think it's getting thinner and thinner. It might be getting wider and wider. It's getting thinner and thinner, whereas a few close connections can actually give meaning and purpose, which that big online presence may actually erode and take away. So I'm encouraging you to, your generation, to dig in and do the hard work of engaging people relationally.
So maybe someone listening to this podcast should turn it off now and go have a face-to-face conversation with someone about these things. I think that would be good.
Well, the podcast is good. That's you're using technology to spread ideas, disseminate ideas and thoughts. So that's
but it
good.
should not replace having these conversations with the people around us, because that's very important, and that's kind of what we've wanted this to be. I really hope that's what's happening. I don't know. But,
and if this spawns some ideas, I'm really struggling with this or this.
Yeah.
Talk to your church leader. Talk to your. Don't be afraid to be open about. Dialoguing about the struggles that you're going through. What does my faith mean? What does it look like? And why? Ask your parents. Why do we do this? And that's one of the joys of being a parent, is to help our young people understand why we do what we do.
Yeah.
And that to me is exciting. I can. We just had this little segment in our own home where some of our children were asking questions. Why do we do this? And so during family devotions, we would sit down and, okay, let's have an open discussion. And so we had a wide open discussion. We're not done yet, but we got started. And I told them we need to maybe put a little question box there. Why do we do this? And especially for young people, they need to, even the preteen and teen years, need to be able to ask those questions and receive answers. I think it's so dangerous when questions are asked and they're stifled. And they're not given answers.
Yeah, I agree with that, for sure. I know that, that's how I feel, for sure. Wow. Wow, well, thanks for sharing, and especially for your hard work in developing this research. I think people might be interested in knowing this. This is all up on your website, correct? All the results of this survey. So timothystoltzfus.com, I believe? Yeah.
That's correct.
Wonderful. So if people want to look into this more, I think especially pastors, church leaders, it could be really helpful to dive into the material you've developed.
Yeah, I have the PowerPoint presentation.
Oh, good.
Along with the whole survey results, and I did some charts and graphs and so forth. Tried to pictorially represent all the data.
Yeah.
And so I would also say, if there's someone that really wants to analyze it further, feel free to email me. You can get my email or contact there as well, and I can give you some more of the results if you want to analyze them.
That would be good. I would, yeah. You've done some good work here, and I think try to get it out to as many people as possible. There's a lot to learn from what
I've
you've
had
done.
different people ask me, could I see the actual results? And everything is you can't trace it back to one person.
Sure.
It's confidential.
Yeah.
But you can actually see the raw data where you could do some more analysis of it.
Wow.
And there's actually a big opportunity here for someone in your generation who would want to put up a menosurvey.com. I've toyed with it, but I don't have the time.
That's a real thought.
But that would be an excellent resource. Menosurvey.com. Actually, that's what I named my website when I first put it up. Just there's so many issues that could be be addressed and queried and a survey. So there's a lot of options here.
Oh,
and also my survey could be perfected. I did it kind of on the spur of the moment, and I didn't have as much. It could be brushed up and some more professionalism put into it.
So maybe this is encourage people to go to the next level with this, because it is important to have a finger on the pulse of what people are feeling in the broader Anabaptist community. Yeah, that's really good. Wow. Well, thanks so much. Thanks for your time and for sharing this. I think this will be helpful to a lot of people.
You're welcome.
Yeah.
God bless.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Cool.